Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the college essay, the first in our application workshop series this summer. My name is Derek Terrell, and I'm the Director of Engagement with the Coalition for College. Just so you all know, the Q&A feature in Zoom is turned on, so you can submit questions throughout the presentation. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Coalition, let me share a little bit about who we are. So the Coalition is more than 170 colleges and universities with a proven commitment to access, affordability, and student success. And together, we work to help students learn about, prepare for, and apply to college. So we believe Coalition schools are smart college choices because they provide responsible financial aid and graduate students in a timely manner, including those who have been historically underrepresented in higher education. And still, collectively, Coalition schools outperform the national average by about 27% when it comes to four-year graduation rates. And that's a really important factor for you to consider when you're thinking about college, which one you want to attend, how much time you want to spend, and how much money you want to invest in your education. So when thinking about college, a really great place for you to start is by exploring the over 170 Coalition schools that are dedicated to making a college education accessible and affordable. So many of our member schools use our shared application platform, which is integrated within SCORE. If you haven't heard of SCORE yet, it's a college planning platform that's free for all students to use. So on SCORE, you can search and discover schools. You can collaborate with your supporters, whether it be parents, counselors, CBO advisors, and then you can apply and also keep track of your application status and access the portals of schools where you have applied, all from within the SCORE account. So it's a simple place to go to learn about college, apply to college, and then keep track of your admissions offers. We still provide our easy-to-use application fee waiver, so just select any eligibility criteria that apply to you, and you can bypass the application fee payment at Coalition schools. Because this application method is available to Coalition member schools, you know that you're applying to schools that are dedicated to helping students graduate on time with low or no debt. And we will drop a link in the chat so you can learn a little bit more. So before we move on to the Q&A portion of this workshop, I want to share a little bit of information with you about the essay. So first, it's important to know the why behind why essays are a part of the application process. So admissions counselors are looking to get to know you through your application, and the essay provides a place for you to share more about yourself, your experiences, perspectives, or your identity. So many Coalition schools that use our application ask students to submit a Coalition essay, which is one essay in response to the shared set of prompts. This helps streamline the application process for you so you can write one essay that you can submit to multiple schools. You'll write an essay of about 500 to 650 words, and you can enter that in SCORE. So this event and others like it are just one way that the Coalition brings you advice and support. So give us a follow on Instagram for more information about and from our member schools. And we'll drop a link in the chat to more advice and articles on the college essay on our website. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the reason that you're all here, which is to hear from admissions counselors directly sharing their advice to you about writing your college essay. So joining us today, we have a really great group of admissions counselors and also an amazing high school counselor, and they're all going to share some of their knowledge and expertise with you about how you should approach your college essay. So I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and we'll start off with Kevin.
Good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Fenor, he, him pronouns. I am with Colby College as a Director of Partnerships and Access, and I've been with my institution for almost 5 years. And I'll pass it on to Riley.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. My name is Riley. I use she, they pronouns, either one works. And I'm an Assistant Director of Admission at Stanford here in Northern California. I've been with Stanford for going on 3 years now, so I'll pass it over to Matt.
Hello, everyone, wherever in the country you are on this fine day. My name is Matt Lucatamo, and I am an admissions counselor here at the University of Delaware. I use he, him pronouns. I have been in admissions for 2 years, and I'm a UD alum myself, so I'm quite familiar with our institution. I look forward to hopefully providing some insight for you all this afternoon. And I will swing it to Ari.
Good morning to those of you who are on the West Coast with me, and good afternoon to everyone else. I'm Ari Worthman. I'm the Director of College Counseling at Lakeside School in Seattle, which is an independent day school, and specifically high school. And I've been at Lakeside for 11 years, and I've been doing high school college counseling for 18.
All right, thanks so much. We're going to go ahead and get started. But as I said, the Q&A function is enabled, so feel free to ask some questions there. We'll start with some of the most popular ones that were submitted with registration, and then we'll move on to the ones that are in the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and ask Matt the first question. So what is the purpose of the college essay, and what are colleges looking for in them?
So the purpose of the college essay is to share something with the admissions officer who's reading your application that the rest of your application doesn't tell us, right? You don't have to write about your grades because we have your transcript. You don't have to necessarily write about being a 3-sport athlete if you don't want to, because we have your activity sheet and your counselor is most likely going to write about that in their letter of recommendation for you. So your essay is kind of the last piece of your application, and it's the last piece of your application that you have entire autonomy over. You can't go back and change that grade in 9th grade geometry, or you can't go back, you can't alter what your counselor is going to write about you in their letter. So your essay should be the thing that you feel like your story would be incomplete without, if you did not share it with whoever was reading your application.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. So I know that we kind of showed the essay prompts there a little bit earlier, and there might be a question in the Q&A as well. So Ari, how do I choose which essay prompt to write about? One student asked.
Yep, that's a really, really great question. And so first, if you look through the essay prompts, the biggest thing to keep in mind is they're just prompts that get you thinking. You can really write about anything that you would like to share with colleges. And so first, I always encourage my students to think about first, what particularly is it that they might want to share with colleges? And a few things just to keep in mind to sort of take some pressure off of yourself, because this is a place where I see students often stressing. This is not your autobiography. So the goal of the essay and the goal of the application is not to encapsulate everything you've done, not to encapsulate every aspect of your personality. And it is not supposed to convey you. There's no way you can convey you in one essay or just even in a college application. You're thinking about what slices of yourself or what pieces of yourself or a piece of yourself might you want to share with a college. So one of the ways I think a really good way to start is to think about what are some of your core values, or just what are things that are really important to you. Maybe identifying some of those core values or principles or things you've learned while you've been in high school. And then once you identify those, sort of working backwards to think, what is a story or memory or experience you've had where you can tell a story, where you can tell that story, which I think is really key. Telling stories enables us to use our own voices and our own lens. So what story could you tell to link it to potentially that value or that lesson that you've learned? One thing I would encourage you to is try not to, it's a good question that someone asked about how do you choose a unique essay topic, or how do you choose a unique structure? I would be cautious about asking that question too much, only because, and my admission colleagues could tell this a lot better than I could. They read thousands of applications. I guarantee there is not a topic that hasn't been done before. So if you spend a lot of time trying to figure out okay, what's that unique topic? You're not going to come up with one. So I think you really just want to come up with what is the authentic and genuine topic that you want to talk about, and how do you have a unique structure to it? That's what I said before. The unique structure is telling it as a story, because we all tell stories differently and we all use our own voices to tell stories. So really think about how do you tell a story to exemplify the potential lesson, the potential value, the potential aspect of yourself that you want to share.
Awesome. Thanks, Ari. The next question I have is for Riley. So how personal is too personal for a college essay?
It's a great question. I do think that it's a common myth or misconception about the college essay that it needs to address some type of severe obstacle or traumatic experience. And, that's not necessarily true. If you've overcome a challenge that truly defines you or lends itself to some critical aspect of your identity, then, feel free to write about it as long as you are comfortable putting that on the page. I'll say, these essays are confidential within our offices and will not be shared, apart from our kind of committee process. But, don't force it. It's just as compelling to write about things that bring you joy, areas of impact in your communities, and families and things like that. So, never too personal, but whatever you're comfortable with, I would say, is the general guidance.
Thank you. So Kevin, I know we sort of touched on this a little bit, but this question came up a bunch during the registration. So This student asked, what if I don't think I'm special or I don't think I'm unique? What could or what should I write about?
Everyone is unique in some way. We are individuals, even though there's 7 billion of us with doppelgangers across the world. We all have our own unique perspectives that we can offer. So consider what makes you unique and what you can offer to a college community. Students often feel that they have nothing to write about, which isn't true. Some of the best essays are seemingly mundane topics. When students are starting their process, be sure to engage with family and friends, get different ideas from them, what sets you apart. Think about your life experiences, as Riley mentioned, accomplishments, obstacles you've overcome, and things that are important to you. As Ari mentioned earlier, stories really do a great job kind of getting those points across, but also thinking about your life outside of high school as well.
Thanks, Kevin. So you just mentioned that word process, and I want to talk to or ask this question to Ari, as you've helped a lot of students in this writing process. So the question is, what should the essay writing process look like? When and how should a student begin?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I'm going to sort of dodge the answer a little bit, only because I think everyone has a different writing process. And so the first thing I would ask yourself is, how do I write and how do I write successfully? There are many people, and I put myself in this category. Some of my best writing comes when I do it under pressure. So I'm not someone that typically is going to start 5 weeks in advance if I have a paper due. But that also does mean that I know that if I work well under pressure and I'm going to leave it closer to the deadline, that I have to carve out time near that deadline to get it done and do it well. So what I would say, though, is whether you're someone who works in advance or whether you're someone like me who works well under pressure close to the deadline, I do think a few different things. I think brainstorming can, the earlier the better. I think as part of that brainstorming process, allow for yourself to change your mind. You might come up with some ideas that you think are really fantastic, and then you might rethink those, or you might have experiences over this coming summer or even early fall where you're like, wow, that's an experience I hadn't thought about writing about before because I hadn't had it, and now I want to write about it. So give yourself some grace. This is not a linear process where step A is going to lead to B, which is going to lead to C. It might be a little bit, you start with A and then you go backwards a little bit, and then you jump to C, and then you jump back to B, and then you go forward to F. That's totally okay. So I'd say brainstorming in advance, I think, is a good thing. And then just start, and then when you can, start writing. This is not a paper that anyone is, you can do drafts and multiple drafts. This is not the paper for your English or history class where you turn this in and someone's grading it. The only thing that matters is the final draft that you're submitting with your college application. So writing in advance, taking some time to think about it. I think it's a really good idea to get 1 or 2 people who know you well and who are maybe good writers to give you feedback on it, whether that's your high school counselor, whether that's an English or history teacher that you're really close with and you really trust. I really want to say, though, part of the process, 1 or 2 people, I think, is key. A big mistake a lot of students make is they have way too many cooks in the kitchen, and they're asking everyone they know under the sun for essay feedback. And you're going to be really stressed out because everyone's going to have a slightly different perspective. You're going to have way too much feedback that will strip your voice from the essay. So think about 1 or 2 people. And finally, for those parents and guardians who might be joining us today, what is really key, I think, as well, is the goal is for students to have a really well-written, well-thought-out essay for a 17 or 18-year-old. So sometimes parents well-meaningly jump in and they think about, wow, like I know for my 50-year-old self, like I could write this better, or my legal colleagues would not approve of this. And they jump in and start with all this language that doesn't really sound like a 17 or 18-year-old would ever say or use, and their voice, their story gets lost in that. It weakens the application because it doesn't help the colleges get to know the student better. But moreover, and I'm going to guess my college colleagues will back me up on this, colleges can tell a mile away when an essay has essentially been written by a 17 or 18-year-old or by a parent or guardian. So again, the idea is a really strong essay for someone 7 or 18, not to have an essay that sounds like it was written by someone who was 45, 50, or 60.
Thank you, Ari. So the next question kind of goes off of that is for Matt. I see in the Q&A 2 people are asking about which mistakes you have seen made on college essays, but this question is, what are some do's and don'ts of writing a college essay? And are there topics that are too cliche and should be avoided?
I love this question. So in terms of do's and don'ts and topic generation, think that if the thing you are potentially considering writing about is a universal experience and or something common that you know that someone else has also experienced, odds are other applicants are going to write about it too. And I know a couple of people asked a question about writing about COVID. Many applicants over the past 2 years have chosen to write about COVID, and I know a lot of my colleagues can kind of attest to that. So think about, and a lot of times students will say, COVID was hard. Of course it was. You know, what is the extra thing that you want to share with me that I don't already know about that experience? Same thing goes for anything like a sports injury. I tore my ACL playing insert sport here, and I had to go through 9 months of physical therapy, and I had to learn how to overcome my injury and still support my team without playing the sport. But at the end of the day, it taught me camaraderie and teamwork. I've just wrote the essay because I've seen it probably 350 times. And that's not to say don't write about those experiences, because we know that you are 16, 17, you have not lived a whole lot of life. We're not asking for Nobel-worthy work, right? We just think about if the thing that you are considering writing about is something that other people could have potentially also experienced, that is not just COVID, not just sports injuries. It could also be if you come from a like a split household. Being a product of divorce is unfortunately something that's more common now than it was maybe 15 or 20 years ago when people were writing about them in college essays. So with topics like that, if you're going to write about them in a way that showcases what makes your experience different than just the overall blanket COVID was hard or my parents went through a divorce. What makes your experience different? How did you grow? What did you learn? Things like that. So that kind of ties in the don'ts, but also if you are going to consider one of those don'ts, how to turn it into a do.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Matt. So Riley, the next question that I have is for you. Is there a particular structure that you're looking for when you read an essay, or can a student use an out-of-the-box writing style?
It's a great question. I think Ari also touched on this, covered this really well. There's no preferred structure or style for the personal essay. It truly is yours to utilize and be creative with, really leaning into that personal element. I do think, you should keep in mind that it should display your writing ability. So you'll want to adhere to, general grammatical conventions and definitely proofread for clarity and conciseness, since we're working with a pretty small, space. But these don't need to be clinical or follow a particular format. It's really yours to play with, and should be, a creative vector or like sample of your voice, so that we can really start to get to know you on our side of the desk. I will say, just a little tip, like really try to be intentional in your crafting. So as you're proofreading, ask yourself what purpose each clause or word serves to the kind of overall message that you're trying to send. And whether it's essential to that larger message, and kind of tying things back in. But yeah, be creative is the general consensus.
Thanks, Riley. So I know that a couple of questions have come in about supplemental essays or supplemental prompts. So this question is for Kevin. First, can you tell us what supplemental prompts are? And then what is the approach to those? And is it a similar approach to the personal statement essay?
Yep, supplemental prompts are specific to the institution that you're submitting the application for. And those are different because they are asking more specific questions. So when approaching those, it's very important to focus on the prompt. One size does not fit all. Be sure not to recycle essays that you've used in other areas of the application. Read and understand the prompt for each college. Also figure out what they want to learn from you. So understanding the question behind the question, something I work with my admissions interns quite a bit when they're listening to guests and fielding questions. It's like, what are they really asking here? So trying to get that underlying sense of what they're wanting to learn. And then also read any tips on the school's website. If they provide any tips and tricks on answering prompts or how to build out those answers in ways that are beneficial to the applicant, be sure to take a look at those as well.
Thanks, Kevin. So I know that this is a question that was asked as well, but Matt, how is the essay weighed in comparison to other parts of the application?
So I think about this like a big pie. So if you have your pie, right, and you split it down the middle, 1/2 of that pie, to me, that's your grades. When you are applying to a college, we really and truly are looking at your academic abilities and how they fit with our campus first and foremost. So of that pie, 1/2 of it is gone, 1/2 of it is your grades. Then you have the other 1/2 that I split into a quarter and then an 1/8. So these 2/8 down here, that's where I would put your letters of recommendation and your activity sheet. Those kind of occupy that 1/4, and then this top 1/4, that's where I think your essay lives in terms of the importance. Because at the end of the day, not only like, yes, we are admitting you as students, but at the end of the day, we are admitting you for 4 years, maybe 5, maybe 6, as people who are going to contribute to life on our campus. And we want the best idea of what kind of person you are and how you're going to contribute. And that's why I think the essay occupies that 1/4 of that side, because it really helps kind of finish the painting a little bit, right? Like your application and your grades and all of those other things from other people, they kind of give you the framework, right? They give you the lines. Your essay provides the color, is how I would kind of phrase that. So in terms of importance, I would say it has 1/4. If you want to put a number on it, I think 1/4 total importance in your application package. But I was also an English major, so I care a little bit more about it than maybe other people might. But that is my rough number answer for you.
Matt, I think you bring up a really good point that there are people on the other side of this reading applications, and every person comes with different perspectives and things like that. So even these questions being asked, you're getting perspective from four people who are very well versed in this, but it can always be different for other colleges too. So one quick question though, as we were talking about supplemental essays, how many of the schools on the call right now require a supplemental essay? Could you raise your hand for a second? Okay, so Stanford requires a supplemental essay and Colby and the University of Delaware do not. So just be aware of that, you all, as you are preparing your applications. So a question that came in over here that I would like to ask is about ChatGPT and other AI tools in the college essays. So people just want to know, are you all looking at that? Are you worried about that? Are you able to identify those? And I will let anybody unmute and answer that one.
I'll just say one thing, and I'm not the best person to answer this, but just thinking about from because I don't read applications myself, but the one thing I would say to those who are students and to really think about is there are ways that AI can be used in a helpful, productive way, right? So I think telling AI or telling ChatGPT to write your college essay, I am pretty sure for all different types of reasons, in some way, shape, or form, that will be detectable in your application. So I really wouldn't encourage you to do that. But ChatGPT and some other forms of AI can be really good ways to sort of brainstorm some different ways to say something. Like, you're trying to think, you're writing this essay and you have this sentence that doesn't really sound good to you, and you're really trying to figure out how else you might phrase it. Ask ChatGPT for an idea. It's a good way just to sort of get some different perspectives. And you can ask the same question multiple times and get a different answer each time, just to sort of see a variety of different possibilities. So I don't think AI is bad. In fact, again, I think it can be really helpful if it's used in the right way. So just think about what that right way could be. If you want to use it at all, you don't have to.
I totally agree. Just to tack on one more thing, and it also ties in with a question that's in the Q&A. If you are going to use AI, or even if you're not, you really should be editing whatever is generated for you, because AI, the question that students ask, can I write a ChatGPT essay and be admitted? Odds are probably it's not going to generate a bad essay, but it's going to be void of tone, of personal voice, which are the things that your essay should convey. And someone asked the question, what's the biggest mistake that you've seen on a college essay? And it is the lack of editing. So people will copy and paste things from a Google Doc into the Coalition app, and at the very bottom it'll say edit later, and they never edit it. They submit the unedited version. So take your time, whether, which hopefully you are writing your own essay, but if you are opting to have, whatever, edit it. Editing is the most important thing when it comes to submitting an essay, making sure that it is 100% your voice, what you want to say and how you want to say it.
Awesome, thank you. So I know that you all have all read hundreds, if not thousands, of essays at this point. But as you think back on some of the ones that you've read, are there certain qualities that you've enjoyed or that you've looked for in an essay? And I'll let Kevin start with that one.
I always enjoy a funny story. Anything that can make you laugh in the midst of reading X number of applications in that day. I know the workloads are very different for folks during that time of year based on their reading style and the process for their office. But anything with humor, anything that's bright, something that I can learn from is always a great read in my eyes. So that's what I would leave. If it's something that you've learned and you can teach it to others in an enjoyable way, that's always great. And also learning about new music or different hobbies and things along those lines are always exciting as well.
How about you, Riley?
Yeah, I can hop in. I personally love like a motif or like a clever tie-in, or like a little bit of wordplay sometimes. Like I think it's great when you can really tell that a student has thought about the development of their idea and like really worked through and tied things back in, and you can start to piece those things together. So I like when that happens, when that shows up.
Awesome. And then Matt, if you want to add anything to that, but then also, could you touch on the question, how many people read your essay on the admission side?
Yeah, so on our end, again, this kind of varies by institution, but UD we go through at least 2, if not 3 rounds of review. So we have one person who reads an application. They're the person who is like the fancy term, the territory manager, or like the admissions counselor for your certain region who is recruiting in your high schools. They are the ones who typically do the first read on the application, just to make sure that you are admissible to the university overall. And then what happens for us, we pass it on to a second reader who will, again, read your application. This time they will read it based on your major of interest. And then the third round read is a quality control round to make sure that the first 2, everything has kind of checked out. So it does depend on institution and how certain schools admit students, whether that be by major or into the school in general, directed versus not. So it all kind of varies, but that's a general framework. It's not just one set of eyes and that's it.
Awesome. And then one last question for Riley. So how much should your essay be tailored to a specific university or maybe activities or experiences that institution has? And you can talk about the personal essay and about supplemental ones as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've covered it with the personal essay. I think, it's truly yours to craft and to share your story. I think that, with those supplemental essays, they're going to ask more specific questions about the values of the university and kind of how you match up with those different values. And so those ones should be tailored. I think we talked about it a little bit, but tailored specifically to those prompts. And you might want to use, the university's websites or explore a little bit to learn more about that so that you can kind of answer the question, and we can start to envision you on our campus specifically. But yeah, I think the personal essay, it's okay to talk about your academics or talk about your academic interests in there if you feel that that's really, really important to, it's inextricable from your personal story. But I think, personal essay is more a chance to learn about you and your background and your identities. And then those supplements should address those more specific specific questions, if that helps.
Awesome. Thank you, Riley. And then one last question for Ari, because it is so important. So what happens if you get writer's block? So what kind of advice do you have for a student if they get writer's block while trying to write this essay?
That is a really great question. Lots of different strategies there. I'd say number one, put your computer or your pen away and come back to it a couple of days later, or just try a different topic. Number two, I think another great strategy is sit down with a friend or a teacher that you really like and trust and tell them about it and ask them to help you brainstorm, ask them to help you get past that and think, how might you move beyond that? I think that's probably one of the most effective ways. It can even, or if it's not even a teacher, it could even be the parent or guardian. Parent and guardians, again, I was saying before, they shouldn't be writing your essay, but they can really be good sounding boards and saying like, hey, I've been working this essay, I have this idea, and I'm trying to write, and I'm just stuck and don't know where to go with it. So I would say, again, using someone else as a sounding board, putting your computer or pen away for a couple of days and coming back to it later. Or just another option is just free write. Just keep writing, just write whatever comes to mind, put it away, then come back and look at it and see if there's actually anything there that you're like, oh, wow, like this is actually good. Maybe I should focus on this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ari. So we are at time, but thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for joining us and giving such great advice. As I mentioned earlier, this is just the first session of our application workshop series. So if you check in the chat, I think we're going to drop down some info about the next ones coming up. And then for our folks on the call, if you can drop whether the contact information for your admissions office or a way to get in contact with someone, that would be great. But at that, I'm going to wish everyone either a good rest of your afternoon, a good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much for joining us. All right. Have a good day, everyone.